Monday, June 5th, 1944. Dear Kitty, fresh, secret Annexe, troubles, a quarrel between Dussel and the Franks over something very trivial, the sharing out of the butter Dussel's capitulation. Mrs. Van Dawn and the latter very thick, flirtations, kisses, and friendly little laughs. Dussel is beginning to get longings for women. The Fifth Army has taken Rome. The city has been spared devastation by both armies and air forces and is undamaged. Very few vegetables and potatoes. Bad weather. Heavy bombardments against the French coast and Pas-de-Calais continue. Yours and Tuesday, June 6th, 1944. Dear Kitty, this is D-Day. Came the announcement over the English news and quite rightly, this is the day. The invasion has begun. The English gave the news at 8 o'clock this morning. Calais, Boulogne, Le Havre and Cherbourg, also the Pas-de-Calais, as usual were heavily bombarded. Moreover, as a safety measure for all occupied territories, all people who live within a radius of 35 kilometers from the coast are warned to be prepared for bombardments. If possible, the English will drop pamphlets 1 hour beforehand. According to German news, English parachute troops have landed on the French coast. English landing craft are in battle with the German Navy, says the BBC. We discussed it over the Annexe breakfast at 9 o'clock. Is this just a trial landing like Dieppe 2 years ago? English broadcast in German, Dutch, French, and other languages at 10 o'clock. The invasion has begun. That means the real invasion. English broadcast in German at 11 o'clock. Speech by the Supreme Commander, General Dwight Eisenhower. The English news at 12 o'clock in English. This is D-Day. General Eisenhower said to the French people, stiff fighting will come now, but after this the victory. The year 1944 is the year of complete victory. Good luck. Superscript 1. English news in English at 1 o'clock. Translated 11,000 planes stand ready and are flying to and fro nonstop, landing troops and attacking behind the lines. 4,000 landing boats, plus small craft, are landing troops and material between Cherbourg and Le Havre incessantly. English and American troops are already engaged in hard fighting. Speeches by Gerbrandy, by the Prime Minister of Belgium, King Haakon of Norway, de Gaulle of France, the King of England, and last, but not least, Churchill. Great commotion in the secret Annexe. With the long-awaited liberation that has been talked of so much, but which still seems too wonderful, too much like a fairy tale, ever come true? Could we be granted victory this year, 1944? We don't know yet, but hope is revived within us. It gives us fresh courage and makes us strong again. Since we must put up bravely with all the fears, privations, and sufferings, the great thing now is to remain calm and steadfast. Now more than ever we must clench our teeth and not cry out. France, Russia, Italy, and Germany, too, can all cry out and give vent to their misery, but we haven't the right to do that yet. Oh, Kitty, the best part of the invasion is that I have the feeling that friends are approaching. We have been oppressed by those terrible Germans for so long. They have had their knives so at our throats that the thought of friends and delivery fills us with confidence. Now it doesn't concern the Jews anymore. No, it concerns Holland and all occupied Europe. Perhaps, Margot says, I may yet be able to go back to school in September or October. Yours and P.S. I'll keep you up to date with all the latest news. Friday, June 9th, 1944. Dear Kitty, super news of the invasion. The Allies have taken Bayeux, a small village on the French coast, and are now fighting for Cannes. It's obvious that they intend to cut off the peninsula where Cherbourg lies. Every evening war correspondents give news from the battlefront, telling us of the difficulties, courage, and enthusiasm of the army. They managed to get hold of the most incredible stories. Also, some of the wounded who are already back in England again came to the microphone. The Air Force is up all the time in spite of the miserable weather. We heard over the BBC that Churchill wanted to land with the troops on D-Day. However, Eisenhower and the other generals managed to get him out of the idea. Just think of it. What pluck he has for such an old man. He must be 70 at least. The excitement here has worn off a bit. Still, we're hoping that the war will be over at the end of this year. It'll be about time too. Mrs. Van Don's grizzling is absolutely unbearable. Now she can't any longer drive us crazy over the invasion. She nags us the whole day long about the bad weather. It really would be nice to dump her in a bucket of cold water and put her up in the loft. The whole of the secret Annexe, except Van Don and Peter, have read the trilogy Hungarian Rhapsody. This book deals with the life history of the composer, virtuoso, and child prodigy, Franz Liszt. It is a very interesting book, but in my opinion, there is a bit too much about women in it. In his time, Liszt was not only the greatest and most famous pianist, but also the greatest ladies' man right up to the age of 70. He lived with the Duchess Marie d'Agoult, Princess Caroline Sayn-Wittgenstein, the dancer Lola Montez, the pianist Agnes Kingworth, the pianist Sophie Mentor, Princess Olga Janina, Baroness Olga Meyendorff, the actress Lilla Watts-Herme, etc., etc. It is just endless. The parts of the book that deal with music and art are much more interesting. Among those mentioned are Schumann, Clara Wieck, Hector Berlioz, Johannes Brahms, Beethoven, Joachim, Richard Wagner, Hans von Bülow, Anton Rubinstein, Frédéric Chopin, Victor Hugo, Honoré de Balzac, Hiller, Hummel, Czerny, Rossini, Cherubini, Paganini, Mendelssohn, etc., etc. Liszt was personally a fine man, very generous, and modest about himself though exceptionally vain. He helped everyone. His art was everything to him. He was mad about cognac and about women, could not bear to see tears, was a gentleman, would never refuse to do anyone a favor, didn't care about money, loved religious liberty and world freedom. Yours and Tuesday, June 13th, 1944. Dear Kitty, another birthday has gone by, so now I'm 15. I received quite a lot of presents. All 5 parts of Sprenger's History of Art, a set of underwear, a handkerchief, 2 bottles of yogurt, a pot of jam, a spiced gingerbread cake, and a book on botany from Mummy and Daddy, a double bracelet for Margot, a book from the Van Dons, sweet peas from Dussel, sweets and exercise books from Miep and Ellie, and, the high spot of all, the book Maria Theresa, and 3 slices of full cream cheese from Crowler. A lovely bunch of peohies from Peter. The poor boy took a lot of trouble to try and find something, but didn't have any luck. There's still excellent news of the invasion. In spite of the wretched weather, countless gales, heavy rains, and high seas. Yesterday, Churchill, Smuts, Eisenhower, and Arnold visited French villages which have been conquered and liberated. The torpedo boat that Churchill was in shelled the coast. He appears, like so many men, not to know what fear is makes me envious. It's difficult for us to judge from our secret redoubt how people outside have reacted to the news. Undoubtedly people are pleased that the idle English have rolled up their sleeves and are doing something at last. Any Dutch people who still look down on the English, scoff at England and her government of old gentlemen, call the English cowards, and yet hate the Germans deserve a good shaking. Perhaps it would put some sense into their woolly brains. I hadn't had a period for over 2 months, but it finally started again on Saturday. Still, in spite of all the unpleasantness and bother, I'm glad it hasn't failed me any longer. Yours and Wednesday, June 14th, 1944. Dear Kitty, my head is haunted by so many wishes and thoughts, accusations and reproaches. I'm really not as conceited as so many people seem to think. I know my own faults and shortcomings better than anyone, but the difference is that I also know that I want to improve, shall improve, and have already improved a great deal. Why is it then, I so often ask myself, that everyone still thinks I'm so terribly knowing and forward? Am I so knowing? Is it that I really am, or that maybe the others aren't? That sounds queer, I realize now, but I shan't cross out the last sentence, because it really isn't so crazy. Everyone knows that Mrs. Van Dawn, one of my chief accusers, is unintelligent. One might as well put it plainly and say stupid. Stupid people usually can't take it if others do better than they do. Mrs. Van Dawn thinks I'm stupid because I'm not quite so lacking in intelligence as she is. She thinks I'm forward because she's even more so. She thinks my dresses are too short because hers are even shorter. And that's also the reason that she thinks I'm knowing, because she's twice as bad about joining in over subjects she knows absolutely nothing about. But one of my favorite sayings is, "There's no smoke without fire," and I readily admit that I'm knowing. Now the trying part about me is that I criticize and scold myself far more than anyone else does. Then, if Mummy adds her bit of advice, the pile of sermons becomes so insurmountable that in my despair, I become rude and start contradicting, and then, of course, the old well-known and watchword comes back. No one understands me. This phrase sticks in my mind. I know it sounds silly, yet there is some truth in it. I often accuse myself to such an extent that I simply long for a word of comfort, for someone who could give me sound advice and also draw out some of my real self. But, alas, I keep on looking, but I haven't found anyone yet. I know that you'll immediately think of Peter, won't you, Kit? It's like this. Peter loves me not as a lover, but as a friend, and grows more affectionate every day. But what is the mysterious something that holds us both back? I don't understand it myself. Sometimes I think that my terrible longing for him was exaggerated, yet that's really not it, because if I don't go up to see him for 2 days, then I long for him more desperately than ever before. Peter is good and he's a darling, but still, there's no denying that there's a lot about him that disappoints me, especially his dislike of religion, and all his talk about food and various other things don't appeal to me. Yet I feel quite convinced that we shall never quarrel now that we've made that straightforward agreement together. Peter is a peace-loving person. He's tolerant and gives in very easily. He lets me say a lot of things to him that he would never accept from his mother. He tries most persistently to keep his things in order. And yet, why should he keep his innermost self to himself, and why am I never allowed there? By nature, he is more closed up than I am. I agree, but I know and from my own experience that at some time or other, even the most uncommunicative people long just as much, if not more, to find someone in whom they can confide. Both Peter and I have spent our most meditative years in the secret Annexe. We often discuss the future, the past, and the present, but, as I've already said, I still seem to miss the real thing, and yet I know that it's there. Yours, and Thursday, June 15th, 1944. Dear Kitty, I wonder if it's because I haven't been able to poke my nose outdoors for so long that I've grown so crazy about everything to do with nature. I can perfectly well remember that there was a time when a deep blue sky, the song of the birds, moonlight, and flowers could never have kept me spellbound. That's changed since I've been here. At Whitsun, for instance, when it was so warm, I stayed awake on purpose until 11:30 one evening in order to have a good look at the moon for once by myself. Alas, the sacrifice was all in vain, as the moon gave far too much light and I didn't dare risk opening a window. Another time, some months ago now, I happened to be upstairs one evening when the window was open. I didn't go downstairs until the window had to be shut. The dark, rainy evening, the gale, the scudding clouds held me entirely in their power. It was the first time in 1.5 years that I'd seen the night face to face. After that evening, my longing to see it again was greater than my fear of burglars, rats, and raids on the house. I went downstairs all by myself and looked outside through the windows in the kitchen and the private office. A lot of people are fond of nature. Many sleep outdoors occasionally, and people in prisons and hospitals long for the day when they will be free to enjoy the beauties of nature. but few are so shut away and isolated from that which can be shared alike by rich and poor. It's not imagination on my part when I say that to look up at the sky, the clouds, the moon, and the stars makes me calm and patient. It's a better medicine than either valerian or bromine. Mother Nature makes me humble and prepared to face every blow courageously. Alas, it has had to be that I am only able except on a few rare occasions to look at nature through dirty net curtains hanging before very dusty windows. And it's no pleasure looking through these any longer because nature is just the one thing that really must be unadulterated. Yours and Friday, June 16th, 1944. Dear Kitty, new problems. Mrs. Van Dawn is desperate, talks about a bullet through her head, prison, hanging, and suicide. She's jealous that Peter confides in me and not her. She's offended that Dussel doesn't enter into her flirtations with him, as she'd hoped. Afraid that her husband is smoking all the fur coat money away, she quarrels, uses abusive language, cries, pities herself, laughs, and then starts a fresh quarrel again. What on earth can one do with such a foolish, blubbering specimen? No one takes her seriously, she hasn't any character, and she grumbles to everyone. The worst of it is that it makes Peter rude, Mr. Van Dawn irritable, and Mummy cynical. Yes, it's a frightful situation. There's one golden rule to keep before you laugh about everything and don't bother yourself about the others. It sounds selfish, but it's honestly the only cure for anyone who has to seek consolation in himself. Crowler has received another call-up to go digging for 4 weeks. He's trying to get out of it with a doctor's certificate and a letter from the business. Cofuis wants to have an operation on his stomach. All private telephones were cut off at 11 o'clock yesterday. Yours and Friday, June 23rd, 1944. Dear Kitty, nothing special going on here. The English have begun their big attack on Cherbourg. According to Pym and Van Dawn, we're sure to be free by October 10th. The Russians are taking part in the campaign and yesterday began their offensive near Vitebsk. It's exactly 3 years to a day since the Germans attacked. We've hardly got any potatoes. From now on we're going to count them out for each person, then everyone knows what he's getting. Yours and Tuesday, June 27th, 1944. Dearest Kitty, the mood has changed. Everything's going wonderfully. Cherbourg, Vitebsk, and Slobin fell today. Lots of prisoners and booty. Now the English can land what they want now they've got a harbor. The whole Cotentin Peninsula 3 weeks after the English invasion. A tremendous achievement. In the 3 weeks since D-Day, not a day has gone by without rain and gales, both here and in France. But a bit of bad luck didn't prevent the English and Americans from showing their enormous strength, and how. Certainly the wonder weapon is in full swing, but of what consequence are a few squibs apart from a bit of damage in England and pages full of it in the Bosch newspapers? For that matter, when they really realize in Bochland that the Bolshevists really are on the way, they'll get even more jittery. All German women not in military service are being evacuated to Groningen, Friesland, and Gelderland with their children. Mussert Superscript 1 has announced that if they get as far as here with the invasion, he'll put on a uniform. Does that old fatty want to do some fighting? He could have done so in Russia before now. Some time ago, Finland turned down a peace offer. Now the negotiations have just been broken off again. They'll be sorry for it later, the silly fools. How far do you think we'll be on July 27th? Yours and Friday, June 30th. 1944. Dear Kitty, bad weather or bad weather at a stretch to the 30th of June. Isn't that well said? Oh yes, I have a smattering of English already, just to show that I can. I'm reading An Ideal Husband with the aid of a dictionary. We're going wonderfully. Bobroisk, Mogilev, and Orsa have fallen, lots of prisoners. Everything's all right here and tempers are improving. The super-optimists are triumphing. Ellie has changed her hairstyle. Miep has the week off. That's the latest news. Yours and